The path to Alunaria was not marked on any map, nor did it welcome travelers with the promise of discovery. Instead, it appeared like an afterthought of creation, hidden behind a veil of mist that coiled around the peaks like a watchful guardian. Stories about the valley were whispered in taverns, more as warnings than invitations, and those who claimed to have glimpsed it spoke of its haunting beauty in the same breath as their nightmares. Kael had heard the tales many times, though he paid them little mind. A bard by trade, his life was steeped in stories, but he preferred the ones he could shape into song. Yet, as his muse faltered, each composition became a hollow echo of his former art. Inspiration had become a fleeting shadow. That was until he heard the melody. It came on a still night as Kael strummed his lute by the dwindling embers of his campfire. A faint hum, drifting through the air like the memory of a dream. It was not the chirp of insects or the sigh of wind through trees. It was music, soft and elusive, with notes that seemed to shimmer at the edges of his perception. The sound pulled at him, beckoning. He set out at dawn, following a trail only his heart seemed to understand. The mist grew thicker as he ventured deeper into the mountains, and the world around him seemed to fade. By the time he stepped into the valley, it was as though he had left the world entirely. Alunaria stretched before him, vast and silent, its floor a patchwork of emerald moss and pale glimmering stones. The stones were peculiar. Some stood upright like sentinels, others lay scattered as if dropped by careless giants. Their surfaces were unnaturally smooth, catching the weak sunlight and reflecting it in soft, iridescent hues. But it was not their appearance that arrested Kael. It was their song. The hum was louder now, no longer a whisper, but a gentle chorus. Each stone seemed to emit its own note, and together they formed an intricate harmony that rose and fell like the breath of a living being. Kael's chest tightened as he stepped closer, feeling the music reverberate through his bones. He placed a hand on the nearest stone, and for a moment, the hum stopped. Then it resumed, richer and deeper, as if acknowledging his presence. Kael gasped and stumbled back, his hand trembling. The air felt charged, as though the valley itself was watching him. "What are you?" he whispered, though he did not expect an answer. The stones continued their song, indifferent to his wonder. As he walked among them, the melody seemed to shift, adapting to his movements. Some notes faded while others grew stronger, guiding him deeper into the valley. He moved as if in a trance, his lute forgotten at his side. By the time he reached the heart of Alunaria, the sun was dipping below the jagged peaks, casting the valley into twilight. There, surrounded by the largest stones he had yet seen, Kael felt the weight of something immense settle over him. The hum became a hymn, a sound so profound It seemed to vibrate within his soul. He knelt, overwhelmed by the beauty and sorrow woven into the music. Images began to flicker at the edges of his mind, fleeting glimpses of places he had never known. A shimmering city beneath a violet sky, a forest where the trees glowed with an inner light, a desolate plain where shadows moved like living things. It was then he realized that the stones were not just humming melodies. They were singing memories. A shiver ran down his spine as the last rays of sunlight faded, leaving the valley bathed in the eerie glow of the stones. He had never felt more alive, yet the weight of the unknown pressed against him, suffocating and tantalizing all at once. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, a voice spoke, soft but clear. "They have chosen you, Bard." Kael turned sharply, his breath catching as a cloaked figure stepped forward. Her presence was both ethereal and commanding, her eyes glowing faintly as they met his. Who are you?" Kael stammered, clutching his lute as if it could shield him from the strange woman. "I am Elyra," she said, her voice harmonizing with the stones. "Keeper of Alunaria, and your arrival was no accident." Kael's heart thundered as the stones' melody swelled around them, an unspoken promise of revelations yet to come. Kael's pulse quickened, though whether from fear or awe, he could not tell. Elyra's gaze bore into him, unyielding yet strangely tender, like a teacher appraising an eager but untested student. She moved closer, her steps silent, as if the earth itself yielded to her presence. "The stones hum, but they are not merely singing," Elyra said, her voice threading through the growing twilight. "They call for you. For me." Kael's voice was barely a whisper. His lute, now a forgotten weight in his hand, felt insubstantial compared to the gravity of her words. "I'm no one special, just a bard looking for a song." Elyra's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though sadness lingered at the corners of her eyes. "You underestimate the power of song, Bard. The stones sing to preserve what has been lost, to keep the memory of forgotten realms alive. Without their harmony, the veil between worlds will unravel." Kael felt the weight of her words settle over him, though their meaning eluded him like smoke in the wind. He glanced at the stones around them, their ethereal glow pulsing in time with the unearthly hymn. "But why me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What can I do?" Elyra stepped closer, her cloak swaying like a shadow caught in the wind. "You hear them, do you not? Their hum is not mere sound. It is life. Each stone holds a fragment of a realm that once existed, a world that was lost to time and memory. The stone's song keeps them tethered, but their melody is fading. Only a bard, one attuned to the rhythm of the universe, can restore their harmony." Kael opened his mouth to protest, to insist that she must have been mistaken. Yet deep within, he knew she was right. The stone's hum resonated with him in a way he could not explain, as if their song had always been there, hidden in the recesses of his soul. What happens if their song fades completely? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. The realms they protect will be lost forever, Elyra said, her tone heavy with sorrow. And with them, Alunaria itself will crumble, for this valley is their anchor. A chill ran through Kael as he imagined the valley reduced to silence, the stones dark and lifeless. Yet even as fear tightened its grip on him, a strange sense of purpose began to stir. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice steadier now. Elyra extended a hand, her fingers pale and delicate, yet crackling with unseen power. "Come," she said. "There is something you must see." Kael hesitated only a moment before following her deeper into the valley. The stones seemed to part for them, their glow intensifying as if lighting the way. The melody grew more complex, the harmonies intertwining in patterns that made Kael's head spin. Finally, they arrived at the center of the valley, where the largest stone he had yet seen stood like a monolith. It towered above him, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer in the dim light. "This is the Nexus," Elyra said, her voice reverent. "It is the heart of Alunaria and the key to restoring the stone's harmony. But its song has grown faint, fragmented. Without the Nexus, the other stones cannot sustain their melody." Kael stepped closer, feeling the stone's hum reverberate through his chest. It was different from the others, deeper, more intricate, yet disjointed, as if it was struggling to find its voice. "How do I restore it?" he asked, turning to Elyra. She reached into the folds of her cloak and withdrew a weathered book bound in leather so dark it seemed to drink the light. She handed it to Kael, who hesitated before taking it. The book was heavier than it looked, its cover warm to the touch. "This is the hymnal of Alunaria," Elyra said. "It holds the key to the Nexus's song, but the melody has been forgotten. Only a bard can feel the rhythm hidden within its pages. You must play it, Kael. Play the song that will awaken the Nexus." Kael opened the book, his heart pounding as he scanned the pages. The glyphs within seemed alive, shifting and rearranging themselves into patterns that defied comprehension. Yet, as he stared, fragments of a melody began to form in his mind, a haunting tune that felt both alien and achingly familiar. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, his voice barely audible. Elyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm. "You can," she said. "You must. The stones have chosen you, Kael. Trust in their song, and they will guide you." Kael nodded, though doubt still gnawed at him. Taking a deep breath, he slung his lute over his shoulder and placed his fingers on the strings. As the first note rang out, the stone's hum shifted, their melody rising to meet his. And in that moment, Kael felt as though he had stepped into the very soul of Alunaria. The first note Kael played resonated through the valley like a ripple on a still pond. The stones' hum responded, their tones rising and falling in harmony, yet not entirely aligned. It was as though they were testing him, their melody slipping from his grasp, just as he thought he had caught it. The nexus stone loomed before him, its glow pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat on the verge of stillness. Elyra stood at his side, her gaze fixed on the book in Kael's hands. The hymnal of Alunaria was unlike any text Kael had ever seen. The glyphs on its pages shifted endlessly, their forms morphing into shapes that defied comprehension. Yet as he played, the symbols seemed to react, glowing faintly and rearranging themselves into fleeting patterns that whispered of hidden melodies. "This is not just a song," Elyra said, her voice soft but urgent. "It is a bridge between worlds. Each note must resonate with the memory of the realms the stones protect. You must feel their essence, their sorrow and their triumph, and weave it into the music." Kael nodded, though the weight of her words pressed heavily upon him. He began to play again, his fingers trembling as they moved across the lute's strings. The melody came haltingly at first, the notes disjointed and uncertain. The stone's hum wavered, their tones faltering as if mirroring his doubt. Then, as Kael closed his eyes, the first vision came. He stood in a city of crystalline towers that stretched toward a violet sky. The air shimmered with light, and the streets were alive with people whose faces seemed to glow with inner radiance. Their laughter was a melody of its own, blending with the hum of the stones, in a harmony so perfect it brought tears to Kael's eyes. But as he watched, the light began to dim, and the laughter turned to silence. The city crumbled into dust, leaving only the hum of the stones as a mournful requiem. Kael's fingers moved instinctively, capturing the essence of the vision in his music. The melody grew richer, its notes weaving the story of the crystalline city into the song. The stones responded, their hum strengthening as if feeding on the memory. Elyra smiled faintly. "You are beginning to understand," she said. "The song is not just music. It is the voice of the forgotten, the echo of worlds lost to time." As Kael continued to play, more visions unfolded before him. He saw a forest bathed in eternal twilight, its trees glowing with a soft, otherworldly light. He felt the sorrow of its inhabitants as they faded into shadows, leaving the forest silent and still. He saw a battlefield of molten rivers, where warriors clad in obsidian armor fought against a tide of darkness. Their cries of valor turned to screams of despair as the rivers consumed them, their flames extinguished. Each vision was a fragment of a forgotten realm, a story etched into the stone song. Kael played their melodies, his music capturing their beauty and their loss. The nexus stone began to glow brighter, its hum growing deeper and more resonant. The glyphs in the hymnal settled into a steady rhythm, guiding Kael's fingers as he wove the fragments into a single, cohesive melody. But the further he delved into the song, the more difficult it became. The visions grew darker, their sorrow deeper, their loss more profound. Kael felt their weight pressing against him, threatening to overwhelm him. His hands shook and his music faltered. Elyra stepped closer, her voice steady and calm. "Do not let their sorrow consume you," she said. "Remember, the song is not just a lament. It is a bridge, a way to preserve what was lost and give it new life." Kael took a deep breath, letting her words anchor him. He focused on the song, drawing strength from its beauty even as it revealed its pain. Slowly the melody began to shift. It grew lighter, more hopeful, as if the stones themselves were guiding him toward a resolution. The nexus stone pulsed with a brilliant light, its hum reaching a crescendo. The other stones joined in, their harmonies converging into a single, unified melody that filled the valley with a sound so profound it seemed to transcend the physical world. Kael's final chord echoed through the valley, and for a moment all was still. Then the stone's hum faded to a soft, steady tone, their glow warm and vibrant. The air round him felt lighter, as if the valley itself had exhaled a long-held breath. Elyra's gaze met his, her expression one of quiet pride. "You have done well, Kael," she said. "But the song is not yet complete. The harmony is fragile, and there are forces that would see it broken." Kael nodded, his resolve hardening. He had begun to understand the depth of the task before him, and though the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, he knew he could not turn back. The stone's song had chosen him, and he would see it through to the end. The valley was quiet, save for the lingering hum of the stones. It was no longer disjointed, but carried a fragile harmony, a melody on the edge of completion. Kael stood at the nexus stone, his fingers still poised on the strings of his lute, his breath shallow and uneven. He could feel the song within him, a living entity tethered to the pulse of the valley. Yet an unease lingered in the air, a tension that crackled like a storm waiting to break. Elyra's voice cut through the silence, soft yet insistent. "The harmony has returned, but it is incomplete. There is one final note to be found, a truth buried in the stone's song. Without it, the realms will not hold, and the veil will not mend." Kael turned to her, the weight of her words heavy on his shoulders. "What truth?" he asked. "What am I supposed to find?" Elyra's gaze shifted to the far edge of the valley, where the mist thickened into a swirling shroud. "The stones are guardians, Kael, but not all realms are meant to be remembered. Some worlds are best forgotten. Their echoes are dangerous, fragments of chaos that threaten the balance, yet even they must be heard. for the song is incomplete without their voice. A chill ran down Kael's spine as he followed her gaze. The mist seemed alive, twisting and coiling as though it concealed something vast and malevolent. "You want me to go in there?" he asked, his voice faltering. Elyra nodded, her expression grave. The final fragment lies within the mist, where the echoes of the lost reside. But beware, Kael. The shadows will test you. They will show you truths you may not wish to see. Kael hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. Every instinct told him to turn back, to leave the valley and its mysteries behind. Yet the stone's hum resonated within him, a reminder of the worlds depending on his music. Taking a deep breath, he tightened his grip on his lute and stepped into the mist. The air grew colder as Kael ventured deeper, the mist wrapping around him like a living thing. The stones here were darker, their glow faint and flickering. Their hum was different, discordant, filled with sorrow and anger. Kael felt their melody pressing against his mind, a cacophony of emotions that threatened to drown him. Then the visions began. He saw a village consumed by fire, its people crying out for salvation that never came. He saw a king seated on a throne of bone, his hollow eyes staring into an abyss of his own making. He saw a child wandering a desolate plain, clutching a broken toy as the wind howled around her. Each vision struck him like a physical blow, their pain and despair searing into his soul. Kael stumbled, his knees hitting the ground. "I can't," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "It's too much." The shadows around him deepened, their forms shifting into shapes that seemed almost human. They whispered to him, their voices a chorus of accusation and sorrow. "You cannot save us. You will fail, as all before you have. The song is a lie." Kael squeezed his eyes shut, his hands trembling as he clutched his lute. The whispers clawed at his resolve, feeding on his doubts. Yet beneath the cacophony, he heard a faint melody, a single fragile note that called to him like a beacon. Drawing on every ounce of his will, Kael began to play. The shadows recoiled, their whispers turning to anguished wails. The melody grew stronger, weaving through the chaos like a thread of light. Kael poured everything into the song, his fingers moving instinctively as the final fragment revealed itself. The visions shifted. The village was no longer consumed by fire, but bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The king rose from his throne, his eyes filled with regret as he knelt before his people. The child laughed. Her toy mended as she danced beneath a sky painted with stars. The song transformed their sorrow into hope, their despair into redemption. As the final note rang out, the shadows dissolved and the mist began to lift. Kael found himself standing before a stone unlike any other. It was dark as night, its surface smooth and unmarked, yet it pulsed with a deep, steady hum. The song resonated within it, complete and whole. Kael placed his hand on the stone, and a surge of energy coursed through him. The melody of the valley swelled, the stone's harmony now flawless. The realms they guarded were safe, their memories preserved. Kael turned to find Elyra waiting at the edge of the mist, her form shimmering like a fading star. She smiled, a mixture of pride and sorrow in her expression. "You have done what many could not," she said. "The song is complete. Alunaria endures." Kael nodded, though he felt no triumph, only a profound sense of loss. The shadow's whispers still echoed faintly in his mind, a reminder of the price of memory. As he stepped out of the mist, the stones' hum surrounded him, their song a testament to the worlds they protected. Yet, deep within, Kael knew the harmony was fragile, and the echoes of the lost would forever linger in the silence between notes. The valley of Alunaria was transformed. The once faint glow of the stones now pulsed with radiant energy, their song flowing through the air like a river of light. Each note carried the weight of forgotten worlds, yet their harmonies were no longer tinged with sorrow. Instead, they resonated with hope, a fragile yet enduring promise of preservation. Kael stood at the nexus stone, his fingers still aching from the journey through the mist. His lute, now silent, rested against his side, its strings echoing with the song that had saved the valley. He gazed at the surrounding stones, marveling at how their light seemed to flow into one another, connecting them in a lattice of brilliance. "You have done it," Elyra said, her voice soft but filled with an unmistakable pride. She stood beside him, her form more translucent now, as if the valley's restoration had siphoned the last of her strength. Her cloak billowed faintly in an unseen wind, the fabric blending with the mist that still lingered at the valley's edges. Kael turned to her, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "The song is complete," he said, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "But it doesn't feel finished. There's something else, isn't there?" Elyra nodded, her gaze distant. "The harmony you've restored is fragile, Kael. The stones are bound together now, their song whole. But balance is not eternal. The realms they guard are still vulnerable, and the forces that would seek them undone will not rest." Kael felt a chill creep over him, though the air around the stones was warm. "Then what was the point?" he asked, frustration creeping into his tone. "If it can all fall apart again, was this just a temporary reprieve?" Elyra smiled faintly, the corners of her eyes softening. "Nothing in this world is eternal, Bard. Not even the stars. But that does not make their light any less beautiful. What you have done here matters. You have preserved the memories of countless realms, given them a chance to endure a while longer. That is no small thing." Kael let her words settle over him, their truth both comforting and bittersweet. He glanced at the hymnal of Alunaria, now resting on the mossy ground beside the nexus stone. Its glyphs were still, their once shifting forms locked into the final melody. "What happens to the hymnal now?" he asked. "It remains here, as it always has," Elyra said. "Its purpose is complete, for now. But should the harmony falter, the hymnal will call again, and another will be chosen to restore it." Kael's gaze lingered on the book, the weight of its significance pressing on him. "Another bard, you mean?" he said. "Perhaps," Elyra replied, her tone enigmatic. "Or perhaps you. The stones remember Kael, as does the valley. Their song is now part of you, and you are part of them. The path to Alunaria is hidden, but it will always reveal itself to those it calls." Kael looked at her sharply, but Elyra's expression was unreadable. He felt the truth of her words in his bones, a tether that bound him to the valley even as he longed to leave its mysteries behind. The stones' song swelled, their harmonies weaving together in a final crescendo. The light they emitted grew brighter, and for a moment the valley seemed to expand, the mist receding to reveal a landscape that stretched infinitely in every direction. Kael saw glimpses of the realms the stones protected: crystalline cities, endless forests, and seas of stars. Each fragment flickered like a memory on the edge of waking, and then the vision faded, leaving the valley as it was. Elyra stepped away from him, her form growing fainter with each step. "It is time for you to go, Kael," she said. "The valley no longer needs you, but the world beyond still does. Carry the stone's song with you. Let it guide you to those who need its light." Kael opened his mouth to protest, to ask what would become of her, but the words caught in his throat. Elyra smiled once more, her presence dissolving into the mist as the stone's glow dimmed to a soft, steady pulse. The valley grew quiet again, though its harmony lingered in Kael's mind, an eternal melody that resonated within his soul. Slinging his lute over his shoulder, he turned and began the long walk back through the mountains. As he stepped beyond the mist, the world beyond seemed brighter, more vivid. His fingers itched to play, the fragments of new songs forming unbidden in his mind. He realized with a pang of clarity that he had changed, not just as a bard, but as a man. The stones had left their mark on him, their memories intertwined with his own. Kael walked on, his heart heavy but full, the echoes of Alunaria's song guiding his steps. And in the valley he left behind, the stones continued to hum, their harmony eternal, their light a quiet defiance against the inevitable march of time.